Hello, Home Slices. It's Kiera with Home Slice Adulting, coming to you guys very quickly with my review for the Bobby Brown story. Now, I had been anticipating this particular BET movie, particularly because BET did such a great job with the New Edition story. So, to get another aspect of the New Edition story from Bobby himself was going to be quite interesting because Bobby's whole life has been quite scandalous, from his bad boy image and his issues with New Edition to him, dancing nasty and, on the stages and all that stuff, and being married to Whitney Houston, and then Whitney passing away, and then his daughter passing away. I knew that it was going to be interesting for us to see all the, what happened during that 30-year time period or however long it was. But before I get into my review, I just want to say thank you for clicking on this video and watching it. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But most importantly, do not forget to hit that little notification bell that will let you know when I post a new video. But let's just get into it. I didn't take any notes on this particular movie because me and my boyfriend watched it together. And whenever I'm taking notes, typing or writing them down, I have to pause the movie. And because of my work schedule, I was not able to watch both of the movies until Friday night. And both movies were about 3 hours long. So it was like 6 hours of watching a movie, and nobody has time to take all those notes or whatever. So for me, I'm just going to go over the highlights of what I thought was interesting in the movie. I thought it was interesting that Bobby did the publicity stunt to make sure that his album sold more than New Edition's album, with him getting nasty on the stage and getting arrested for it. It definitely contributed to his bad boy image. Something that I did not know about his life was that his friend was killed, at the very beginning of the movie, basically the same day that he went to the funeral for his grandmother. So that was something new. And, growing up in the projects, people dying is something that's almost commonplace. But when it's somebody close to you, it's a little bit different. And so we see at this point where Bobby has basically broken up with New Edition, and Bobby's mom, apparently previously sold drugs. And so Bobby took a note out of his mama's handbook and was selling drugs too, okay? And almost got into a little trouble because of that. But his mama got him back on the right track musically and asked someone, to give Bobby a chance with his solo career. And that's what ended up happening. And he asked his brother Tommy, to manage him. But Bobby Brown can't be managed, apparently. But moving on, some of the more interesting elements of the story that I thought was noteworthy was the fact that he and Janet were having an affair. And I will admit that I feel like this movie definitely, because it's told from Bobby's point of view, kind of romanticizes him a little bit. When people tell the story of their lives, they don't want to seem as bad as maybe they actually were. And even though Bobby revealed parts of his life that were not so flattering about him, going to jail and, basically, I can't think of the name, when you haven't had drugs in a long time, detoxing, detoxing in jail from being on drugs and, resisting the temptation to get back on those drugs. And, for the most part, I think that Bobby was romanticizing himself, even though he did tell us about some less flattering aspects of his life. So, but when it comes to Janet Jackson, I definitely believe that happened. I definitely believe that Janet would not want to be seen with Bobby because he is a bad boy. And, Janet was, Miss Jackson, if you're nasty. But at the same time, I could understand why she wouldn't want to be seen with Bobby Brown, for having, such a bad reputation, I guess. But moving on, I do believe that's true. It's interesting because any of us who have seen any of the other stories, I think it was Lifetime that did a story of Whitney that was played by Yaya. And it was interesting to see how Bobby's story differed from that particular Whitney movie. I mean, the story about him being with his sister's fiance and him getting shot in the club, that story was a little bit different. In Bobby's story, he showed that the guy that he was with, the one who ended up getting killed, name I really can't remember right now, that he was a hothead. Like in Bobby's version of events, this guy was just hanging and basically was picked out of the crowd for being in a different gang or whatever. But in the other story on Lifetime, the guy who ended up getting killed was, kind of a hothead and had stepped on somebody's shoes and was talking a lot of noise and, was selling drugs in somebody else's territory or gang involvement. It's interesting that Bobby's version of events makes this guy who ended up getting killed at the club more of a angelic character. It's really interesting. And I understand him not wanting to paint a bad picture of a person who has passed away. So I kind of get that. But I laughed so hard I had to pause the TV from laughing so hard when Bobby goes to Whitney's hotel room and he tells her he can't find any Coke because it's Grammy weekend and the person who, he gets his Coke from was all out. And he had Coke on his nose. That was so funny. That was so funny to me. Now, another interesting thing is that in the Lifetime, I think it's Lifetime, in the Lifetime version of Whitney's story that featured Yaya, it claimed that Bobby learned that Whitney did Coke long before their wedding, as opposed to Bobby's version of events where he claims that he didn't know that Whitney did Coke until their wedding day. Now that came off as him lying to me. I do not believe that he did not know that Whitney did Coke until they were about to get married. I don't believe that. What else? The young lady who played Bobby Christina looked like Bobby Christina. My boyfriend told me that she's from Power. I don't know her from that particular work, but that was another thing. I did not like that I felt they didn't try hard enough to get people who actually looked like the people that they were playing. I did not like that the actor who was playing Bobby Brown, Willie, I didn't like that they did not age him appropriately. We have seen Bobby Brown go from being, the young person in the 80s who's singing My Prerogative up until now, on being Bobby Brown and everything and having, that show. And up until now, they did not age him appropriately. Willie didn't put on no weight. Not saying that he should have to gain weight, but that they should at least make it appear as if he had gained weight. No, nothing about Willie aged. Like at the end of the movie, when Bobby Brown is like 50 something years old, he still looked as young as he did when, Willie the Great was playing him back in the 80s. So I didn't like that. One thing that I do like is the aspect of music throughout the movie was that it was chronological and it helped you to understand and to know at what point we were in his story. And so, early 90s, they're playing Escape. And, later on, you feel that the music has evolved, to a certain extent. It's really interesting, his depiction of his perception of who Whitney was. And I felt that it was probably an honest depiction based on what Bobby remembers, but considering how he was on Coke, who knows how accurate, that is. But it felt as if Bobby Brown was giving us the real deal about who Whitney was without being mean and nasty and purposely demeaning. Because we know that Whitney, to a certain extent, is a queen of shade, okay? And a lot of the things that Whitney's character was saying came off as things to me that I feel like Whitney definitely would say. So I felt it was like an accurate depiction of Whitney and that it was not slanderous or anything. You all let me know what you think. Also, I didn't necessarily care for the actress who was playing Whitney. I feel like she's a good actress because we know her from The Game or wherever, but I don't think that she was necessarily right to play Whitney, but whatever. It's already happened, so nothing I can do about it. But acting wise, I do think that she did a good job. As far as Tommy goes, I like that Tommy had been like a good presence in his brother's life and had been attempting to manage Bobby Brown. Oh, that incident where they were on the bus and where Bobby was so coked out that he thought Whitney was trying to kill him. And he ran with a gun to some white man's house in Georgia and almost got himself killed with a shotgun. And then the man is like, is that Whitney Houston? Like, things got really crazy. And my boyfriend was like, did that really happen? And I was like, I guess it did. I mean, I would like to know to what extent BET verified these stories. Because according to what we saw, one of the members from New Edition was on that bus when that whole incident happened where he ran to somebody's house and almost got shot with a shotgun. Okay? So, did they verify with him that this is what happened? I mean, if he is admittedly on drugs, maybe his, thought process, the things that he remembers, things that he doesn't remember, are not necessarily true. So I wonder to what extent they actually went and verified these different stories from different points of view and perspectives. Now, what I won't talk about during this video is all of the backlash that kind of came as a result of the movie. I heard some things about Bobby Brown's sister claiming that Bobby was not being truthful about certain things. Janet Jackson claimed that he was not being truthful about certain things. So because I haven't really looked into those stories, I'm not going to really talk about them at all. But let me see what other noteworthy things I thought about in this movie. I felt like, again, I do feel like Bobby romanticized himself. But I will say I probably believe probably 80% of what happened. It was difficult to see how Bobby and his family were treated at Whitney's funeral. I do not believe that Bobby Brown found out about Nick after Whitney died. I feel like he had to have known who Nick was prior to that, but whatever. I like that the movie ended on a good note. I thought that his relationship with Alicia was interesting. He painted her out to be different from the other people that he had been with, and that she actually set boundaries for him, and there were things that she wasn't going to take from him. And I guess she turned out to be really good for him because they are, still married to this day, and they have 3 children. It's interesting that she was Teddy Riley's girlfriend at one point. I thought that was interesting, but they had been broken up for years when she and Bobby had kind of, kicked things back into gear. What else? Y'all, I can't really think of what else stood out to me in particular. Um, but I think one of the things that I can accept for a fact is that Whitney was already on drugs before she got with Bobby. And contrary to popular belief, it was Whitney who got Bobby into drugs as opposed to the other way around. Um, and the tremendous amount of loss that went on in Bobby Brown's life, from losing his grandmother, was the first thing that we saw. And then he lost his friend on the same day that, he went to the funeral of his grandmother. Then somebody was killed, in the same car with him, according to his version of events, after a night on the town at the club. His mama died. His daddy died. I mean, his ex-wife Whitney died, and Bobby Christina died. They all just It was all just very unfortunate, the amount of close losses that he's faced in his life. So at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing I come away with is that Bobby Brown, for me, comes out looking better than I have ever seen him in my eyes. I think we have all kind of felt like Bobby was the thing that corrupted Whitney and led to her demise. And I think that after hearing his story, regardless of how romanticized it may be, that it makes me have more compassion and more sympathy for him and more understanding for, why the things turned out the way that they were. So at the end of the day, I do think that I view Bobby Brown in a better light than I probably ever have viewed him. And I'm still, side-eyeing a few little things in, the story that I thought of before. But, those are just my thoughts. You guys, this is what happens when I don't take notes. I'm so scatterbrained and all that kind of jazz. But you all let me know what you thought of the Bobby Brown story. Did you find any parts particularly scandalous? Were there things that you didn't know and you're surprised at? Are there elements to the story that you feel like were not truthful, the same way I thought a few things were not truthful? You all let me know what you thought, and peace out, home slices.